Alf, going back to when we were young, comps have been on the brain for a long time. We've been thinking about this. We were waiting for that monthly magazine to come through, the Beckett Monthly, to come through and tell us, do we have up arrows? Do we have down arrows? Who's hot? Who's cold? So comps in the sports card world industry are not a new thing.
Buy the sets each year or pick out one or two guys and buy some cards. But if you do it strictly as investment, that's the only reason, you will get burned eventually. And you'll get burned pretty hard because maybe only 1 out of every 5 rookies will make it. I mean, I can name guys like Sam Horn and Joe Charbonneau that people bought like crazy. They were out of baseball.
But man, times have changed, and now we have apps, we've got market movers, we've got card ladders and others that will tell us recent sales electronically right on our phone. How amazing is that? We've come a long way from 1990 from print magazines like the Beckett Monthly. But I think we would all agree that we've got to be a little careful when we're looking at comps, and that's what we're going to look at today. A few examples of where comps can sometimes lead us astray. Before I dive in, make sure to get that discount off of your first PSA submission, SCD25 code at the shipping and billing screen for $25 off that first submission over at PSA 1 card minimum to try out PSA. You got a collection to sell? JustCollect.com. I've got a fancy landing page there in my video description as well as the pinned comments to take you over to Just Collect. You want to sell 20% of the collection, 80% of the collection, they can give you an appraisal over there at JustCollect.com. All right, so for those that are new that have come into the hobby over the last 6 months, year, 2 years, going back to 2020 and 2021 during the COVID craze, man, the pandemic pricing was wild, and it wasn't even just on a few cards that may have been manipulated, but it is on a lot of cards going back to that time period. And we're going to just look at a few examples of this. One of the most famous of these examples is the 86 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 10, where there were recorded sales in the $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 range for that card. Now, that card has slid all the way down. I think it got down to about $100,000, and now it's up to what, like $200,000, $240,000, $250,000, something like that. So it's recovered a little bit. But one thing I really want to harp on here for this particular comp, and all the cards we're going to talk about here today, and just the risks that come in the collectible space versus more traditional type stuff, like stocks, for example, is if we're looking back at this, the recorded sales, we're talking about literally like a handful or less of these sales. So it's not as if there was, 100 different sales of PSA 10 Michael Jordan, PSA 10 86 Fleers that went for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. We're talking about a few sales, but those few sales can have an impact on other cards. Looking back at those sales, they certainly were outlier sales, but you know what? A lot of cards during that time period had exactly that same graph, exactly the same chart. I'll throw up another one, 1972 Topps Julius Erving rookie card. I love this card. I used to own it in a 4 or 5, I can't remember, but I bought it in 2020, early 2020, and I sold into the craze. This again is an example of a card that it kind of like spiked up. It's that middle finger spike up on the chart, and then it kind of goes over and it's more flattened out a little bit. We're in a sports card bull market now, as we've seen, where some of these cards are up some from where they had corrected to after these wild sales. But again, we're talking about a handful of sales or less. And can we base the entire market of a card on a handful of sales or less, in a very short period of time? And I think that is something that we have to watch for with any card, even today when we're looking at cards that set all new high record sales. Just because somebody pays $10 million for a card today, it doesn't mean that it's going to go for more than $10 million in the future. We've seen in 2021 where cards went for huge money, and they are literally cut in half from those few sales that happened. That 86 Fleer Jordan PSA 10 is a perfect example of this, where that card is up. It's up. It's like $220,000, $240,000, $250,000. It's actually up from where it's been, and it's still less than half of these few sales that happened in that $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 range. So I guess that's kind of the question is, does a handful of sales make a market? And that's what becomes really, really tricky in this space, even more so when dealing with rare cards with 1 of 1s and out of 5s and all that good stuff. I mean, the Jordan PSA 10, there's 320 copies of it. It's not a rare card. It's rare-ish in that condition grade, of course, for 80s cards, but it's not a rare card. They're available all the time. But what about for 1 of 1s and out of 5s? And again, that's just something that's going to be really interesting to watch over time. And also, just to throw another wrench into this thing, the types of inserts, the types of parallels, the types of one-of-ones that people like today, there's no guarantee that people are going to like those in 10, 20, 30 years. There is no guarantee of that whatsoever. I mean, I can't remember which year it was. There's a Beckett magazine that was going back to the early 2000, 2005 time range. And it was talking about how the green PMG Jordan was one of the most overrated cards in the entire hobby. Yes, that green PMG that is worth millions of dollars today. And I think there was a sale that was listed there for like $9,000 in that magazine. If I can find the clipping, or if I can find kind of that page out of I believe it was a Beckett magazine talking about this. It was just an opinion piece, but basically talking about how that was one of the most overrated cards, and how could that card sell for that $8,000 or $9,000. Now think of where we're at today. In the 80s and early 90s, when I was collecting, there wasn't one-of-ones or parallels. But you know what there was a lot of that people chased after, that thought, again, they were going to buy and hold, and these were going to be really expensive in the future because they were rare, they were oddities? Error cards. Yes, error cards. In the 80s and 90s, there was all sorts of little print defects and different cards that were upside down, or the back was wrong, or there was some sort of error with it, and people collected those as that they were oddities, and they're like, you know what, this is going to be worth something. People paid a premium for error cards. Now today, nobody gives a damn about error cards from the 80s for the most part. There's some exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, didn't pan out. So just because there's very popular cards today, I'll use kabooms and downtowns as examples. Now, it could very well be that kabooms, downtowns, or whatever people are saying today are the next green PMG. Maybe that is the case, but what if it's not? Because people are spending some massive money on these cards. Huge, huge money on those cards. And again, I can't see the future. Maybe those cards are going to be extraordinarily popular in the future. But that is, again, we're just talking about this collectible space is very finicky, and it is not even close to being easy to predict. Even in sports cards, which is something that's been going on for 100 plus years, it's not a newer collectible like a Funko Pop or whatever. This is something that has been around for a long time, but people's collecting tastes change, player preferences change. There's a lot of things that can change. And so I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent here about the comp discussion, but this was also something that just popped in my head. But just thinking about how low the sales volume is, very low sales volume. This is not the stock market where you're buying and selling Apple stock, and there's hundreds of thousands of units that are changing hands each day, and it's just not that way. So when you're trying to assess the price of a stock or the price of real estate, you have so many more units that are being bought and sold to be able to compare against. In the collectible space, that volatility can be fun, and it certainly can offer opportunities. There's arbitrage opportunities, absolutely, but something that we just have to be mindful of. The one other example I wanted to throw out here, and it is something that is very common. New people might not realize this, and it's why I want to talk about it, but I'm going to call it the race to get the first PSA 10 to market. And that's what a lot of folks do with new releases. It has worked in the past, and we'll show an example of where it worked really well in the past with a Donruss Mac Jones rookie card. I understand Mac Jones has kind of resurrected his career a little bit, but this card went for something like $2,000. Again, there was one or two sales, I believe, at this number. It's now a $10 card. Okay, so, but again, this was not a card that was selling, every day, even for, a week or 2 weeks or a month, where it was selling consistently at $2,000, and then it fell off. We're talking about literally like one or two sales. And so be extremely careful with new PSA 10s. The reality is, guess what? There's going to be more PSA 10s that hit the market, unless it's a one-of-one or whatever. But if it's a one-of-one, then people don't really care, probably, if it's a PSA 10. But if it is a fairly common card like this was a base Donruss rookie card for Mac Jones, there will be more and more and more of these PSA 10s that come out. Now, there's examples of cards where there just aren't a lot of PSA 10s based on the print quality. An example of this would be Caitlin Clark's Silver Prism from this last rookie class. I think her gem rate is like 8 or 9% or 10%. It's really low. But for the most part, a lot of these cards, they come out and they've got even a horrible gem rate at 30%, let's say. 25, 30%, there's still enough of them printed to where you just got to wait for more of them to come out. More volume of those to come out, and then you don't have to pay an exorbitant amount for a PSA 10. always best to wait on new product. I think that most people would agree with that, unless it's just something you just feel like you got to have in your collection right at that particular second. But usually it's really good to wait a little on new product and just let that thing come to you. Again, if it's a one of one or something to where, hell, that card could come out of a pack and it could go into collection for 20 years, then maybe you do have to pay up for something like that. But for base cards, base rookie cards especially, they will come down off that PSA 10 price. It happens every single time. People will race to get those PSA 10s out to market so that they can make as much as possible on those. It's a good strategy for resellers, but not always the best deal for the buyer, prospector, or whatever. All right, guys, a little bit of comp talk today. I know I went around in a little bit of a circle, so thanks for hanging with me. Have an amazing day ahead. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.